Shall we start?
Sounds good.
Great. Hello, everyone. Very good evening to one and all. My name is Karan, Senior Product Manager at Global Logic and Marketer Champion 2019. And I'm co-hosting this session along with Rachit Puri, who co-leads the India Virtual Marketer User Group with me. And it's our extreme honor and privilege to welcome Christopher Wilcox as our special speaker for today. Hey, Chris.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. So before we begin with the session, I just wanted to go through some of the housekeeping slides that Marketo asks us to present. So I'm just going to start it right here just to make sure everything is in place. So as usual, there is no self-promotion or pitching of any kind that is permitted in MUG events. Don't contact people outside of the user group without their consent. And if MUG members share their use cases at a user group, please don't share that information without their consent anywhere. You can sign up for, if you haven't already, you can sign up for Marketer user groups in person or virtual at this link right here. And if you want to go ahead and update your subscription center settings, that's the link for updating the settings over there. Those are the links that I was just referring to. So you can sign up here, you can choose your city and the Marketer user group and regional or virtual, and it will appear accordingly. And here's the link where you can update your subscription set of settings. And Purple Select. So like I always mention, this is the fun part of Marketer where you get to solve challenges and earn a lot of rewards. So that's how the Purple Select looks like. So like you can see, there are a lot of fun challenges. As and when you solve the challenges, you get, you climb up the ladder here in the leaderboard over here, and you get to claim exciting rewards. And like you can see, these are the rewards over here. And anyone of you planning to attend the Marketer Summit next year, earn enough points and you could probably win a ticket for the Marketer Summit next year. And going forward, so upcoming opportunities for MUG members. So for the first time, Marketo is hosting the Marketing Nation Live Summit, and this is going to be an amazing event. So for all of you who could not attend the Marketing Nation Adobe Summit this year in person, this is a wonderful opportunity to have great sessions and get involved in the get latest updates regarding Marketo. So do click here and register for it. So they're right there. So that's the registration link. And as of today, the speaker sessions are also announced. So there it is. So me and Chris as well will be presenting on different topics. So it's going to be absolutely fun, and I encourage all of you to register for this event at the earliest. And the best part is it's absolutely free. There is no registration costs here. So do make the most of it and make sure to register on this event. And going forward, so if you haven't been a part of the Advocate Nation, here's the link to click and sign up for the registration form. So, the Advocate Nation is the one-stop starting point where you can get started with your advocacy efforts, and be it applying for a champion or Fearless 50 or joining a MUG. So this is actually the starting point. So I encourage all of you to go ahead and sign up for this at the earliest. And the application for Fearless 50, the deadline has been extended. So any of you who want to apply yourself or want to nominate somebody who that drives fearless decisions, well, this is a great opportunity to nominate them. And the last date for it, like I said, has been extended. It has been extended to 23rd of August. So you still have quite some time left. So make sure to nominate or apply yourself. And the upcoming Marketer user group meetings. So this is the MUG calendar for August. So any of you who are traveling to the US or these areas, you can attend these, or you can join a virtual Marketer user group, as mentioned, by signing up with the links given in the previous slides. And that's you can get started on engaging in the Marketer user groups. And the topic for today. So, getting started with velocity and upping your token game. So, here is, again, it's our immense pleasure to welcome Chris to our session. So, Chris is 2019 marketer champion, a marketer certified expert, a full stack specialist, and a long time marketer user, and comes with great knowledge and experience using marketers. So, hearty welcome, Chris, and over to you.
Thanks so much. Give me just a second here. I'm going to switch over to my screen here. There we go. You guys see my screen here? Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So today, just kind of wanted to talk about velocity and getting used to using tokens in your Marketo programs, just because it's a kind of an interesting way. But I feel like a lot of people are very intimidated by that. So we're going to first just talk about what is velocity. So what is it? How do you use it? When do you use it? When to use script tokens? So when does it make sense to use velocity script versus a snippet versus dynamic content? Those choices that you have when you're building out your programs. Highlight some tools of the trade and best practices. So it's a little like, where do you get started? So this will help fully get you kind of squared away on what you do and how you do it, so that you can be more efficient as you get started with these. Then actually how to create and test a token, and then a couple examples that we've created here for you. So first and foremost, what is velocity? So velocity it's a coding language. So it's built on a JavaScript framework, and basically it's used for scripting HTML content. So that's a little ambiguous, but basically in Marketo you can use the coding language to create snippets, and you can put those inside your email assets, and essentially it's creating dynamic content. Velocity scripts can access opportunity data, and they can also reach and read custom objects in your instance that's kind of integrated with your CRM. So you can do some more advanced things and really, really powerful things from a dynamic content perspective that you really can't do at the one-to-one level like you can inside a snippet or something like that. That's more segmentation based versus actual one-to-one kind of personalization. So in short, it's a coding language for dynamic content, and it's kind of more robust than your traditional dynamic content creation methods in Marketo. And it's not scary. I get a lot of people that say it's code. I'm not interested. But it's absolutely not scary. It's really not that hard to understand what it is. And basically, the biggest questions I get is, well, when should I even use it? When does it make sense to use it? People are so used to using dynamic content or snippets or whatever kind of their current structure is, so they're not even sure when the best time to use a velocity token might be. So the easiest example to me, when you're kind of getting started, is you have to reference two attributes on a contact record. So if you want to look at two pieces of information and combine and compare the two to output one thing, so a good example is using a male, female, gender field and someone's last name to create a snippet that says, hello, Mr., Miss, Mrs., last name. You can do that with a script token really, really easily. Whereas if you have to create like a segmentation and then also kind of build on top of it and then reference the last name field. It's like, that's way more complicated than writing one short snippet of code in a token to do the same thing. Or you need to look at multiple conditions to determine what should show. So you want to understand if they're located in a specific region and you want to share a specific piece of content to people in that region, you can look at that field and then show or hide that content within it. Right there in real time as you go through without having to create kind of that segmentation in Marketo. There was a great piece that Beth had put together on the community that kind of compares some good use cases of tokens versus snippets versus dynamic content. So I definitely encourage you to read that. There's a link in the deck that you guys can check that out or search for it on the community. But in a lot of cases, well, there's a few things. So one, a lot of times you can use any one of these methods to create your execution. To me, it becomes what's easiest and fastest to maintain. And I think velocity scripts can a lot of times be much easier to maintain on a long-term basis than updating a segmentation and rerunning that every single time you need to make a change to your dynamic content or something like that. So whereas velocity, it's updating, a couple lines in a thing of code and you're good to go. So some quick limitations just to understand: you can't nest script tokens within script tokens. You can only reference fields, so you can't create one token and then put it inside another one and kind of combine them that way. And you also can't drop them into snippets or dynamic content. So if you think about it, if you put a script token within dynamic content, it's when does it show and then when should it run? And just from a processing standpoint, it can get pretty intense pretty quickly if you start combining these things. So you're not able to do that in Marketo today. So getting started, I know this seems probably a little preemptive, but one of the things that I like to tell people is using that Marketo kind of UI editor versus kind of having your own offline piece of software. So I think that the editor can be finicky. That's just my experience, but it can be. It's always online, so you have to be connected, and if your connection drops, that can be an issue. The pro is you can really easily access all the field names because they're right there in the UI, and you can kind of drag and drop them as you need. I prefer working in an offline editor. Like I use Notepad++. So if you've ever worked in that before, it's a free text editor tool that you can just work offline. It's just like working in Notepad or something like that. You can then maintain a history yourself offline because Marketo doesn't save a history of previous versions. So this will let you, if you had a token that was working, you made some changes and it stopped working. If you don't kind of keep a record yourself, you're a little out of luck. So I find working in an offline editor just kind of keeps me on that due diligence of keeping a history, keeping a record, so that we've all absolutely had that happen. I have certainly had that happen where things break. You can always revert back to your last version if you need to. The negative is you still have to go into Marketo to kind of figure out what the field names are that we're going to reference inside our code. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal. So I won't go through all this, but if you first get Notepad++, it'll look like on the left here where everything is just black. But there's a syntax highlighter that one of the other champions, Courtney Grimes, has made. So it will mirror the way that the syntax gets highlighted, just like you would if you were using the Marketo editor. So you can download the syntax highlighter. She posted it on GitHub. And then you just basically import that into your Notepad++, and then any files you save as .vm will look just like the Marketo file here on the right. So much easier to kind of see where your statements are working and what is what from the color coding there. So like I said before, Marketo doesn't maintain a history. So definitely something to be aware of. So keep an offline archive. Every time I update a token, I create a copy of the current token, drop it in a little archive folder, and then modify the version. Doesn't take long, takes 5 extra seconds. But again, it's just kind of that stopgap of we have a history somewhere. And then I like to document while I make changes to my code. I actually document out with comments what I'm changing and when I'm changing it. So there's a kind of a history there of when we implemented certain things into tokens. And we'll go through the specifics of that in a second of what that means. But you're just kind of keeping track of what you've had in the past and what you're changing as you go forward is kind of a general best practice. So one more fairly important best practice is where you store your tokens in Marketo really, really matters. So you can store them either just in kind of an activities folder or at an individual program. So either an email program or a default program, there's that My Tokens tab where you can access all the tokens that are available wherever you're currently navigating. And basically, tokens are accessible to every subfolder and program that's below in the navigation tree, wherever that token is stored locally. So in other words, if you look on the right here, if I put a token in that Chris Wilcox folder, every single folder underneath that will be able to read and use any tokens that I create in that folder. If I created one just in that, testing email templates program, only that program and programs within it that are nested would be able to read that. So just be mindful of where you're actually creating them. I generally have a program for testing tokens where I put all my laboratory experiments in there. That way, nobody else outside of that can access and use those tokens. But then when I have, call it the production version, I'll drop that into kind of the parent folder of everywhere that's going to need to reference that. And we like in my experience, we have some tokens that we use in almost every single email program and email send we deploy. So those will live kind of at that highest level in the instance, so that every single program can access them without issue. We're maintaining one token that can be used everywhere, and others may be specific to a program. So you have a monthly update on a product, and maybe you only need to reference the token in that program, so you can keep that program in that token. Every time you send it out, that's the only program that needs to reference it. So be mindful that if you are in a program, if you're in a subfolder and you can actually edit a token in one of the nested folders, that creates like a local version of that child in the child folder, and you'll see where it'll say overridden. Just be aware of that, because it can create problems, and then you've got two versions of the same token out there. So just be mindful of where you're creating your tokens, so that it's gonna be in the right place for you to use them long term. And then also be mindful of where you're editing tokens, that you're not doing it in a folder below where you should really be doing it, because you want to do it at that wherever it actually lives is kind of the place to maintain tokens. There's not, in my opinion, not a ton of places where the override status is real useful. All right. So creating a token. I feel like this is the part where a lot of people get a little intimidated, but at its core, velocity is really just like an if this then that problem. So, if your record meets a certain set of conditions or criteria, do this thing or show this information as the output of my little script. So it all works kind of within if statements, generally speaking. So you open your if statement with that kind of hash if. Works just like Excel. If you've ever done an if statement in Excel, it works almost exactly the same way. If blank equals blank, show this. Then you have an else if, which allows you to have multiple if statements. So if whatever your record doesn't qualify for the first set of conditions, it can go to a second, a third, a fourth, however many you need to accommodate whatever the outcome of your script needs to do. So, if record type is 1, do this thing. Or else, if it's 2, do this other thing. That's kind of the way that works. Kind of just goes down the path. And the first time the record being put through the script meets the criteria, that's the one that'll get the output. So you can kind of nest those down, knowing it'll always just be the first one that it meets if it's a single if statement. Else is kind of your fallback. So you have to have an else. In other words, the person doesn't meet any of the criteria that I've written in my if statements, do this thing or show this thing. It could be literally do nothing. That's a valid else, but there needs to be a statement there. You need to close that script out. So the general structure is your opening if statement, any else if statements, if you need them, that kind of final default the output for everybody else, and then close that out. If you forget that end, when you go to approve your email asset, Marketo will yell at you. It'll say, unexpected characters and whatever, and you'll be pulling your hair out trying to figure out what's going on, but you just need to have that end closed to your script, basically. So that's kind of the structure of how you write the actual the logic, and then once you have that, you have the operators that you are going to write your rules with. So you're going to open your if statement, and you're going to say if something is this, or it equals this, or it does not equal this. And those kind of characters there are how you actually write that in a script. So and is 2 ampersands, or is it two vertical pipes, equals is double equal sign, and not equals is exclamation point and equal sign. So basically you just combine those with your if statements and all the different fields that you have access to in Marketo to write your logic statement. You can use parentheses to join and combine these things as well, just like you can for advanced smart list rules. If that's an example that you're familiar with, when you write those advanced rules, this and this or this, and you can kind of use parentheses to group them as needed. This works literally exactly the same way. Your if statements is just about you're referencing fields instead of smart list rules, and your and ors, and you can do equals or does not equal kind of through there. And then true false fields are coded as a 1 or a 0. So if you wanted to say if something is true, you'd write something is equal 1 as opposed to saying the word true. So just be aware of that. And then just generally speaking, Velocity is built on a JavaScript framework. So if you've ever worked in Java before, there's kind of this, you can use field name dot matches and kind of use parentheses to define your values instead of this kind of more standard, like this is what we're talking about here with the ampersands and the pipes and everything, is kind of like a pretty simple markup There's a more advanced version of this markup that you can use that kind of follows the more traditional Java framework. But we don't need to get into that. This works just fine. It's a great way to get started and is a little more accessible. But this bottom field here, if you need something to, you need to use the word contains, like our usual operator of this field contains this value. That's actually how you would execute it in Velocity. I know it looks scary that field name matches and then these 100 characters and then whatever value you need. But it took me forever to figure that one out, so I figured I'd share it. So you guys have that. If you ever need to use contains, just literally copy that, replace field name with your field, replace value with whatever it needs to contain, and you're off to the races. So you can add comments, like I was mentioning earlier, kind of right inside your token code by starting a line with that double hash mark. So basically, just like a lot of coding languages, you can add comments, like HTML, you can add comments that they're in there so you can read them as a human being, modifying and understanding what the code is doing. But the actual compiler who's running the script ignores that information. So I love to comment as much as possible. I'm kind of a comment crazy person. But that way I always know what I'm looking at. And if somebody else has to pick up a script that I was working on, they know the last thing that I did, or I can kind of explain from afar or from in the past what this thing was intended to do. It helps make managing scripts with a team a little bit easier. So I highly encourage you to comment as much as possible. Kind of a good best practice there. So keep in mind, like I said a little bit earlier, people will only qualify for the first if statement that they match if it's a single if statement. You can have a token that has multiple if statements. So you can do if this, do this, close, if this, do this, close, and it will run for all three of those separately. But if it's a single if statement, the first time they qualify, whatever the output is what that person's going to see. So just be aware, kind of, if you need to have multiple outputs. There's those, you can use separate if statements, not those else if statements. Else if is like, if this, no, then do this, then do this. If you have multiple, it's if this, do this, and if this, do this, and if this, do that. So it's kind of that, just understanding the difference between when to have separate if statements and use an else if that makes any sense. Okay. So this is when you combine those two things, how this kind of comes together is you have your first if statement. So if, logic statement happens here, below that in your token, you'll have the output for people who meet that. You can use tokens, like you can actually use values from the user record. When I say a token here, I actually don't mean a script token. I mean, you can use kind of a Marketo field. You can reference a last name field or a first name field or their sales account owner or their phone number or their email address or whatever you want. You can pull in any of those fields that are in your Marketo instance. And then the else if will be for any secondary or additional sets of criteria. You can have as many of those as you need to have to accommodate whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And again, below that, the next line, the output for that set, your else statement, which is everything else. So if they didn't qualify for any of those previous if statements, this is the output for those people. Sometimes that's a blank line. That's just fine. And then your end. So this is the general structure of kind of a basic token, if this makes any sense. So how do you know what field names to use? So I get this question a lot. Like I get the idea of, if somebody's email address contains this domain, show them this thing. And if it includes this domain, do this thing. That's probably a bad example, but just, for explanations purposes. How do I know what field to reference to search for that? So if you go into the Marketo token editor, so that's when you go to that My Tokens tab, you drag a new token script over into the tokens window. It'll pop open this little modal window with the email token editor. And you can literally find it in your integrations panel like this on the right here, drag it over, and you can see it says lead.email. There you go. You can get rid of those brackets. That's kind of the formal markup. You can leave them too. Honestly, it doesn't break anything. It's just kind of best practices to clean them up. Sandy Whiteman on the forums would kill me if I didn't say that. So I'm just going to make that statement. We should delete the brackets. But yeah, you can remove those so that they're not really necessary. And it just helps clean up your code, makes it a little more digestible. So what I like to do is I'll we'll think through the logic that we need. What fields do we need to reference? You can come in here quickly, drag them all in. You'll have the 4 or 5, 3, whatever field names you need. And then you kind of go back to your Notepad++ and work in there to actually write the code. So you're not in this small window. I think it's cumbersome to work inside Marketo's editor, but just my opinion. So here's a quick example. So in this example, we wanted to show a sales rep name in our from name field for our best clients, because we have them categorized into numbers in the West region, and just our regular old brand name for everybody else. So this is like in your from name field in your email. This is to basically send an email on behalf of your sales rep when someone's a top client in a specific region. So first of all, you can see I have comments in here, those gray lines with the commented out. So if the sales group is 3 or 4 and the region is West, show that sales owner name. So you can see my if statement. I have my parentheses there. So if their lead sales group equals 3, the double pipe is or sales group equals 4, close that parentheses, and the lead region is West. The output is, you can see lead owner first name and lead owner last name. So that's going to actually reference whoever the contact owner is on this record when they meet the criteria of sales group 3 or 4 and they're in the West. For everybody else, I'm just showing my brand name. So you can see the brand name isn't referencing any tokens. It's not going to be dynamic for those people. It's really just dynamic for people that meet my criteria. So that's in our else. And then you can see we have that end there. So this is a really simple way of, if you think about trying to achieve this type of personalization with dynamic content in Marketo, it'd be a huge pain, because you'd have to have either a separate program for people in the West, or you'd have to make a segment of top sales owners in the West and then reference that in your from name to show it that way. But it's just not going to quite work as easily as it is to literally write 2 lines of code of they're in sales group 3 or 4 and they're in the West, show this first name, everybody else gets brand name. This is a whole lot easier to maintain to me than every time someone changes their sales group, or we want to focus on a different region or a different additional regions, we need to make new segmentations in Marketo. This to me is a good, simple example of it's easy to wrap your head around. It's top clients in this region, personalize it. Everybody else, we don't care. That's a lot easier to achieve with code than it is with your more traditional.
Another example maybe that I can think of is something that we implemented is during GDPR. So we wanted to have our emails with dynamic content on the basis of the country for the particular user. So rather than trying to do that in every email, what we did was we created a universal token and a scripting token that was inherited by all the programs underneath. And the logic simply said that depending on the country, we would show different text around the privacy policy and like how they can reach out to us if they want to raise any concern regarding the subscriptions. So the best part about that was like it was really scalable. And secondly, like since it was a token that was referenced across all the marketing programs and the emails, no one actually had to manually go and make updates in that. So that I can think is another very simple example of how velocity scripting can eliminate all the manual work that someone may have to do to add dynamic content in the email.
And that's a good example too, because it's not complicated logic. It's looking at the person's region and then showing the appropriate links or kind of privacy policy information based on that. And that, I agree, that's where I find the most scalable, easy to use kind of examples of this. Doing that with a segmentation is a pain, because then you're still in every email asset or in your template maintaining, well, what are we showing for region A and region B and region C? If you do that all in a script token, it's all in one place, modify it once, you're good to go in every single program that goes from that moving forward. So it just eliminates all that kind of one-off maintenance that we try to avoid, right?
Yep.
So let's see here. So after you create your code, you can go in here and you drag that script token over. So this, you go to that My Tokens tab. So this is actually how you actually create your token. So you're going to go into that My Tokens tab. You it says script token. You drag that over into the tokens pane. You nick a name, you edit, and then you paste your code in here. A couple things to remember. If any field you use in your logic, you have to actually check the box on that right integration pane in Marketo when you create your token. So Marketo knows, hey, I need to reference this field in the script. Otherwise, you'll see your logic starts to break because Marketo doesn't have all the information it needs to actually run the code that you've created. So just be mindful of where those right arrows are, making sure you go through any field that you reference in either in your logic or in your outputs. Just make sure that they're checked in that integration pane. So that's kind of literally that's how you create it. So once you write your logic, it's a copy and paste. It's really pretty straightforward. So testing, I feel like testing always becomes how do I make sure my logic works? It's not the easiest thing ever in Marketo, but it's really not that complicated. So what we'll do is, based on whatever you need your logic to do, I just use a couple smart lists or a single smart list or whatever that finds leads that meet or fail all the different criteria sets that you have in your logic. So one that passes it, one that fails it, or if you have else if statements, one that would fail your first if statement but would match your second one. And kind of identify those leads in your database. And then you can either create a static list of those people and go into the email previewer and view that list and kind of scroll through and it'll show you what would render for each one of them. Or you can just send yourself a sample. I just send myself samples all the time. I think that's an easier way to do it, but obviously everyone's working preferences are different. And literally you just send it as that person. So if you've never worked with code the tokens before, it's really important that you pick somebody in that person field. So that's telling Marketo, hey, send me a sample as if I were this person. And then that send to at the bottom is, and who am I going to send this sample to? So you put your test lead in that top box for the person, and you put your email address in that bottom box for the send to. So that will, I could put Karan's email in my person box and mine in the bottom, and it's going to generate a preview that is for Karan, send it to me so that I can confirm or disconfirm that my code is working as expected. So troubleshooting can be a little bit challenging just because it doesn't tell you why it failed, or if your token logic is completely blank or something like that, it doesn't tell you why. That's why it's important to remember your closing end statements and kind of that, just understanding that general syntax of if, else, end, and how the operators work. Because knowing that is 3/4 of the battle. Because if you've got that nice and clean, it's probably either an integration issue, or possibly your lead doesn't meet the criteria. Double check your lead to make sure that whoever you identified as your test case actually is the correct test case. Because I've certainly done that where I'm like, this is a perfect test case, and then it sends and it's absolutely not at all what I thought it was going to be. And then I recheck the record and, oh yeah, somebody had unsubscribed yesterday. No wonder they don't meet my criteria anymore because now they're unsubscribed or whatever. So just be mindful of that. But yeah, send yourself some tests, make sure each outcome is running the way you should. And then from there, it's just on an ongoing basis, modifying it and kind of rerunning these quality assurance tests as you modify and update tokens. Make sure if you're adding a suppression list or something, make sure that if you find somebody on that suppression list, that when you send it, it renders the correct way. Don't just assume because you add the logic it'll work, because sometimes you forget that quote for defining of what it should be, and you kind of miss out on those kinds of things. The syntax highlighter in Notepad++ helps with a ton of that, because you can actually see, if you forget a quote, everything after your open quote will be green, because green is the color for kind of just values in velocity. So that's part of the reason why I'm a huge fan of that offline editor. You can quickly modify it. You can edit it really quickly, and it makes it much easier to visualize. Just like looking at a big, long HTML file for email. If it's all just black text, it's a monster to look at. But if you have that color coding, it becomes much more digestible very quickly. And this is the same way.
And, just to add a quick point on the testing part of it. So, by experience, I had one of our clients who actually had a seed list, and before everything email campaign, they used to have an actual batch campaign run to that seed list to make sure that the stakeholders are seeing it properly and viewing it properly. So yeah, couldn't agree more to that point.
Yeah, and seed lists are great as well. That's a great point. If you have, like, we actually have for certain programs, I have fake records that meet the criteria of like the 10 groups that we're sending dynamic content to. So then those are my 10. So it's always those 10. They're not real people, but they meet the criteria, so that exactly I don't have to go hunting every time. And depending on how often you're changing these, like doing something like that of creating a test record might be the right use case. But yeah, I agree completely. I'm a big fan of seed lists as well. So a couple other possible troubleshooting tips. So if you're seeing nothing render, so if you're sending yourself a token and literally nothing is showing when you get your sample, sometimes if you go into that Marketo WYSIWYG editor for tokens, if you start modifying the actual token information before Marketo has a chance to catch up and load all your integrations on that right panel, it can break everything. It looks like it's set up correctly on the front end UI, but it actually has kind of broken behind the scenes. So when that editor first pops up, wait the 2, 3, 5 seconds for that right panel to populate. So if we go back here, that right rail, it'll be blank for the first second, and then all of a sudden it'll populate with kind of all the different options and trees you have for the different integration choices. As soon as that happens, you're good to go. No issue at all. But just wait for that to load before you start modifying the token. I've had many long days where I'm trying to figure out what broke on my token, and it's more about the integrations didn't quite keep up versus my token logic being wrong. To fix that, if it ever happens to you, literally just go in, uncheck all your integrations, save your token, open it again, recheck all your integrations, and save it again. So you just have to kind of reset the integration panel, but it's a huge pain. So be aware of that. So just wait the 2 or 3 seconds for it to load, and then you'll be golden from there on out. And let me see here. Oh yeah, and sometimes it doesn't populate at all. It'll just stay blank when you go in, and it's kind of that spinning wheel, which sometimes I think we all experience in Marketo. We're just taking a long time to load. I just do a hard refresh, Control-Shift-R. In most browsers, does it kind of drops your cookies for that session and reloads it. Almost always resolves the issue. So if you ever kind of run into it's just spinning and spinning and spinning and nothing's loading, that's a good way to accommodate that. So let's go through this quick checklist of, as you're creating tokens, kind of how you should go through this again. So one, if you want to work in the offline editor, set that up, which is a one time, and you're good to go. So then write out your logic requirements. So what do you want this to do? A lot of people write this out using pseudocode. So it's literally just words, if the person equals this thing, do this thing, and just kind of literally writing it out as a sentence can help you then once you get into actually creating code, what you need your code to do. I'm a big fan of that. It just helps kind of ground me before I start working in actual code, syntax, and rules. And I know what I'm trying to do before I really get into the actual code development. So that'll also help define what fields you need. So you'll understand what fields you need to reference to create your logic. So then go into that Marketo editor, pull those fields that you'll name, just drag them over. You'll be able to see the actual API names for each of those fields, and you'll have those in your back pocket. Go into your editor, write your logic conditions and if statements using your fields. If field 1 equals whatever, do this thing. And then figure out where you want to create that. Once you're done creating all your logic, once you figure out where it should be placed, which again, like I said, just be mindful of any folder or program underneath where you create a token will be able to access that token. So if it's a global token, you want it as high in the hierarchy of folders as you can. And if it's a local program token, probably put it in that program. Really, to me, those are the only two use cases. There's never a throw it in the middle. There's no real use case to throw it in the middle. Unless only a specific group of programs is using it. But even then, you might just use it as a global token, because if you need to reference it elsewhere, you have to move it, which is a huge pain too. So figure out where you want to do that. Drag your token over, open the editor, wait for that integration pane to load, paste your code, and then check off the boxes for all those fields in the integration panel. So, and that's it. And your token is created and saved, and it'll work correctly. Find your test cases and send those to yourself, to your database, and then drop it in a sample email. Send those previews to you, send your samples to you, and kind of QA from there. So it probably sounds like a lot because we didn't actually write any code here, but it's really just all about understanding how to reference fields and what the logic statements look like and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I think Rachid had another example here he wanted to talk through.
Yeah, the other example, like this is something from our past experiences where we were leveraging velocity scripting for an e-commerce website. So e-commerce and marketer is not a very common use case, but there are companies who like to use marketer for sending out product-related emails. So this is something that we created for one of our clients where the company was using Shopify and they had their whole cart and online product portfolio set up. And we wanted to send the emails via Marketer for different products and transactions, along with all the product details, which were fully customized. So that's where we started leveraging the velocity scripting, and we were able to integrate the Shopify website with Salesforce. So we had our custom objects set up within Salesforce, and then referencing those custom objects, we were able to get all the data within Marketer to send dynamic emails via Marketer. And it was not just the transactional emails, like there was a whole set of emails that we were sending out with the customized product information to the leads that we had in the system. And at that point, like when we were building on, like we did explore different options of like either use an API or do a bunch of stuff. But eventually we ended up with velocity scripting, something which we felt was overall very scalable and easy to maintain in the future. So this could be another application of velocity scripting. It's relatively complicated than the other examples that we covered in the session today, but still is a really good use case for the companies who may have a requirement like this.
Yeah, and there's you can kind of go crazy with velocity. What we're talking about here, the way that we're talking structures, the if and statements are kind of velocity in its simplest of forms. You can do some really powerful, complicated stuff. You can write loops that go through a list of records or a list of fields and kind of perform a set of actions over and over and over for every time something occurs, which is a really powerful use case, but that's beyond what an introduction to velocity should be covering. But another good example of one that I've run before, and here's just some resources to share while we're chatting through some use cases, is we have people who've requested to receive a certain set of documents or potentially a series of documents every time they're updated every quarter. So there's 5 of them. So you might have asked for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, any combination of those. So the easiest way for us to create a list of links for an individual who's requested to kind of receive that most recent information is we have a velocity script that is 5 if statements. If field subscription 1 is true, show this link, else is do nothing. You go through all 5. It's one script. You drop that in one email. Everybody gets sent the same email asset. It'll populate the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 links that person has asked for specifically. It's one email. We maintain one token with links in it. And we can automate that. It'll send every single quarter as soon as all 5 docs are ready. And we don't have to send 5 programs or do dynamic content for every use case of which combinations of those subscriptions somebody has. This makes it a lot easier to have one asset and one token than do all this work to create 10 of those. So another simple-ish, but probably applicable use case if you have people that are requesting information periodically.
Yeah. And maybe we could look at some of the questions that we got. So I'll just start reading from the chat. The first one that we got is velocity scripting only used for dynamic functionality personalization, or can it be used for other purposes also?
Generally, the output is going to be some kind of content or code. So you could use it to, I'm trying to think of another use case. I mean, it is generally used to output HTML. I'm sure there's a use case you could use to output something different behind the scenes that for something, but essentially it's just running a set of criteria and then outputting something based on that criteria. But the only place it can run is inside an email asset as it's going through Marketo's compiler. So you can't put it on landing pages. You can't put it in anywhere else. So for now, pretty much, it's email personalization. I'm guarantee you can get creative with where you put the personalization and whether it's shown to the person or not. But yeah, it is for personalization purposes, pretty much.
Yeah, and adding on to that, like velocity scripting allows you to be really flexible with your imagination on how you want to send the emails and the content you want to push into those emails. You can work a lot towards the formatting of that content, whether it's going to be in a tabular form or whether it's going to be something which is going to be pulled out from your other systems. So in those ways, velocity scripting can really help you establish Marketo as a single system of emails, which I've seen a lot of companies trying to achieve that, where they have different platforms sending out different sort of emails in silos, but they really are not able to connect them together because of the data limitation challenges. Velocity scripting is something that can really help bridge that gap and eventually get everything into a single system.
And a big use case that I have in my role today is so I'm not sure if others have this, but we have turnover in our sales organization. We do a lot of automated personalization from on behalf of our sales organization to prospective and existing customers. So we'll send messages on behalf of our sales reps out of Marketo dynamically. But we have turnover and we have a lag time due to some organizational requirements of when records are actually updated with a new contact owner. Because of that lag time, theoretically, someone may be getting information or sent something from someone who hasn't been here for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because there's usually about a month lag. By using tokens and by using velocity tokens to power the personalization, we can actually maintain a suppression list, a short-term suppression list of, I know somebody is leaving the organization. We'll quickly drop them into someone meets my criteria and sales owner first name is not Chris and last name is not Wilcox. So that if I am their owner, it will not personalize for me. So that's a good way to clean up your personalization, or fields are missing. Like we try to do a signature. If the phone number is missing, if that field is blank on the sales rep's information, we will not show a signature. We'll just show a kind of generic close, that kind of stuff. So to me, it's a quality thing too. We can do a lot of good, clean quality assurance by using a short, easy kind of spot checking script, as opposed to just dropping those fields into an email asset and assuming that they're correct and populated.
Yeah, actually, that's quite common as well. I've seen several other companies doing that, where they want the emails going from Marketer to be fully personalized with the signature details of the sales reps. And like you said, it becomes really hard to manage when someone is leaving and when someone is joining. So that's another good case. Another question that we're going to take is there any tool for writing the pseudocode?
No, pseudocode is really just you are, I want to, okay, so it's us talking through these examples right here. So it's, if someone is in this region and they're a top customer, I want to show them my sales owner's first name. That's pseudocode. I mean, that's all it is. It's literally, to me, it's typing out or saying in just real words, what your criteria for showing or hiding or whatever information may be. There might be tools out there, but I haven't worked in any personally. I don't know about you guys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next one, it's not a question, but more of a comment. So someone mentioned that when we are using velocity tokens, and if you're trying to send samples, and there are scenarios where the sample send might fail. So it's always a good idea to approve the emails. And if the emails are already approved, then maybe try unapproving those emails and then reapproving those emails to see if Marketer throws any error. And if it gives an error, it's going to tell you what the issue is. But that way, you can make sure there are no errors happening when you're trying to send samples without approving the emails. So that's more of a best practice.
Yeah, and the other thing is, so with that, that's kind of, I mentioned earlier, I have like a test program that just sits in a test folder where I have essentially blank email assets that I just drop tokens into for testing. For that exact reason, that's a really good comment of, if you're approving an email, Marketo will throw an error if there's some syntax code incorrect in your script. So that will give you a place to hunt. I find Marketo's error messages to be not all that helpful, because it'll say like unexpected exclamation point at line 54. And it's like, line 54 when you're running the compiler isn't the same as line 54 in my script. But sometimes it can give you a place absolutely to kind of go and hunt for your error. But yeah, I definitely recommend, a good point, like using a separate email asset with your new code or your example code before you try to put anything into production, kind of a production email, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really helpful. There's one more that I'm going to take. Can someone with little or no coding experience learn Velocity and implement it efficiently?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know that it seems intimidating. It's really not. There's one. The Marketo community is endlessly helpful. I will probably be on there if you have questions. Sanford Whiteman will absolutely, he'll yell at you for not highlighting your syntax when you post your code, but he is helpful. Anybody can learn it. I truly believe that. If you've ever worked in HTML or CSS or any of that, it seems really scary at first. But once you kind of understand how it works, it's really not all that complicated. It's really easy to deconstruct. Sometimes having a token to break down before you try to write your own from scratch is easier to learn. So that's why I tried to provide a couple simple-ish examples in here, so you can kind of see how you break it down, and then you can just update it or modify it to be your kind of first script. Anybody can learn it. It seems intimidating. You'll be fine. Just stick with it. It's not so bad.
Yeah. Great. I think there are no more questions. Like, if there are any questions, feel free to put in the chat now. And like, we are going to share the recording and the deck. And if you have any questions after the session, feel free to reach out to Karan or myself, and we'll be happy to help. And like, Marketer community is always the place where you can always get all the answers that you usually need. So, yeah.
I'm a very active community user. You'll probably see me on there if you have questions. So just post. I'm sure I'll see it.
Great. All right. I think then we can wrap this session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. This was great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you.